How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another God of War Ragnarok video. Now, there was a developer Q&A today over on the Santa Monica Studios Discord server, and basically there was a lot of developers that were answering a lot of the community questions, and we got a little bit more information about some of the different things in the game, such as combat, the skill trees, the armor, and the upgrades. They talked a little bit about armor customization and how you can transmog different outfits to look however you want. There's quite a bit of new information that was revealed in this Q&A, so I recorded the entire session for you guys to listen to. But before we get into that, I just wanted to say I'm doing a God of War Ragnarok giveaway. All you guys have to do is be a subscriber of the channel, hit the thumbs up button, and then follow the link down in the description down below. But with that said, I hope you guys enjoy the video, and I'll talk to you guys next time.
So I'm just going to throw it over to you guys. If you guys could maybe just introduce yourself, your title, maybe how long you've been at the studio. There's no icebreaker here that's not cringe. So if you just want to say something funny, I guess that would be okay. All right. On Thawed Spinach is Mr. Eric Williams, our game director. If you want to unmute yourself and just introduce yourself to the people.
So I was explaining to Corey Barlog while I picked the name Unthawed Spinach on the side. Yeah, I'm Eric Williams. I'm the director of God of War Ragnarok, and this is going to be spoiler free, I hope. If not, sorry. Denny and Mahir.
You hope.
Yeah, I mean, like, things happen. It's live, right? So Denny and Mahir are awesome combat design leads on the project, and worked with them on 2018 as well, and with me here even further back. So I'll let them talk about themselves for a little bit, and they'll answer most of your questions because they're way smarter than I am. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Mahir, if you want to go next.
Hey everyone, my name is Mahir Sheth. I have the profile picture of Denny because I thought it would be funny. Denny agreed, so yeah, it's a little bit confusing, but it's for our own entertainment, so I hope you understand. Denny and I share co-lead combat designers on God of War Ragnarok. I've been in the studio a little bit over a decade through a couple of different projects, and been working on Ragnarok for a while, and it's been a blast.
Perfect. Thank you, Mahir. And Denny, you are up.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Denny, the other combat lead. I've been at the studio. I keep thinking I've been at the studio for like 5 years, but actually it's been over 7 years now. On 2018, I did a lot of the enemies, some of the bosses. I worked on the Valkyries, had fun watching people fight those as well. And yeah, my profile picture is basically me here as I normally just picture him. Is just usually talking for me, answering my questions. So it's great. We have a good dynamic. Me here's a tank. I'm just kind of in the shadows lurking.
Okay, so you're DPS. He's tank. Okay. Well, thank you guys. We got one question to start us off. This has been, I think, confusing for a lot of people. So we just want to clarify this really quick. So this was asked by Shatu and Colonel Rambo and a lot of other media. So just first and foremost, why did you guys cruelly remove the quick turn button, the fan favorite button? Please answer for your crimes.
So quick turn is still in the game. Surprise, surprise. Yeah, quick turn is in the game. It is not removed. The default control for it is now holding L1, so that's blocking and pressing down. We had some players quick turn on accident in the past, so we wanted to make an input that was more deliberate because, as you can imagine, turning around 180 when you don't expect it maybe isn't the best thing in the world. So now it's a little bit more deliberate, but it's absolutely in the game. There's a couple of different options you have of switching the input. So yeah, if you liked it in God of War 2018, it's back for you to use on Ragnarok. It is not removed.
So you hear to hear first, guys. Propagate the message everywhere. Quick turn is still in the game. All right. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, let's get into some of the more fun questions about combat and enemies. So this one was asked by Emil. So for all three of you, what was your favorite enemy that you've either designed or worked on or played against that has been announced so far? Again, no spoiler. Denny, do you want to start? I'm gonna make you talk.
Well, why do you want to make the rogue go in first? You got to send the tank first.
Because
Anyway.
you get assassinate. if you go first.
All right. Let's see. I guess my favorite enemy were the enemies that we revealed. We were just talking about this a while back. I guess it'd be the Einir captain. That's the big dude with the all the cool looking armor with the big scythe. I generally like those kind of creatures where like they're super engaging to fight one versus one, but they also work in like a group encounter. Those are usually my spiel. So yeah, Einir captain.
For me, I'll go with a bit of a trolly answer just because that's on point. I like the wretches. I like the that's the profile picture of Grace, Banshee on here. They're little funny, annoying creatures that are kind of adorable, and they're also the reason for your death a lot of the times. So it's a good balance.
They're little bastards. That's what I call them. Eric?
What was the question?
Damn.
No.
What's your favorite enemy that's been announced?
Favorite
Either to help
enemy
design
that's
or
been announced?
yeah, or to play against.
I mean, they're all good. I mean, that was why we put them in the game. I don't really have like a favorite. Do you guys like have you had actual favorites like the Einhar Captain and Wretches? Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like the light ones are pretty good. I think that's a good dynamic that we kind of showed them in a different light last time, and the dark ones were I think a lot of people thought were a pain in the ass. So I think balancing them out with the light ones it's good for the Alfheim as a whole. But as far as favorite, I mean, I don't know. There's too many good ones, and we've expanded on what everybody wanted with more enemies and stuff like that. So I can't wait for you guys to fight them all. I don't really want to.
For anyone listening, the light ones and dark ones are light elves and dark elves. We have an internal name where we just say light ones and dark ones. I don't know why
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
in there. But yes, the light elves and dark elves.
Thanks, Pierre, for correcting me.
Yeah, we might some dev names might slip in, but we'll do our best. Yeah, I remember the dark one. I did it. No, the dark elves last time. They were zip zapping around, so they were definitely a little harder. Some of the harder difficulties, but the light ones, the playstyle looks a lot different, and I think people are gonna have a ton of fun with them. Especially their design. They look super cool with the words. Okay. All right. So thank you, Mill, for asking that. So next question. This was asked by Master Player and also I don't know how to say this name. Legtriga, L3G Griga. So what was harder to design, the blades or axe combat?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there's kind of two different aspects to think about. So I think there were two different questions. I'm going to kind of combine them here because there's the design aspect, like the game design or the combat design aspect, and then there's the implementation. So all the work that goes into making it real. And I think on God of War Ragnarok, one of I would say the blades was a little bit more challenging from a design perspective because we had the blades come online on God of War 2018 towards the later half of the game, and a lot of it was kind of celebrating the blades and returning them and feeling very familiar, right? That this is a weapon that you've known and loved, and they're back. And on God of War Ragnarok, we knew that we wanted the blades to be there from pretty early on, and we wanted to give a lot more unique identity to the blades as a weapon. So many of the Blade's moves have been rethought of, a lot of the skills and abilities, and we kind of had to find what's the right balance where, if you have the axe and the blade, there's kind of reasons pulling you to use one or the other. Something that we talk a lot about on the combat design side is that, God of War is not a game where you kind of just pick your weapon. It's not like, okay, I have, in other games you might play, it's like, okay, I picked the sword for the entire game, or I picked, this other weapon, the hammer, for the entire game. In God of War, Kratos is the master of his tools. That's something that we talk about all the time, right? Everything at his disposal is for him to use, and so we want to make sure that they're on equal footing, and there's different reasons to use each one. So we've really gone deep into that, which I think was cool from a design aspect. From an implementation aspect, both weapons have their challenges for sure. We try to make weapons that are, at the forefront of the industry. They're the weapons that we want to play. We are our own harshest critics when it comes to the type of gameplay that we build. And so it's really a huge effort from combat design to animation to gameplay engineering. and many other teams, audio. I mean, it's the whole gamut. So I think for the blades, the most difficult thing is just getting the look of the blades to feel correct. And what I mean by that is that, the chains have been there for so long, and in God of War Ragnarok, we want to make the best version that we've had, and just getting the curves to look right on the chains as they go out, getting them feeling really good, the trails that they play with the VFX, just all of the presentation work that goes into making this the mythological weapon. I think the blades definitely has a big challenging component there, and yeah, lots of love to the gameplay engineering team for constantly fixing things that we bring up. And on the axe, I mean, just having a melee and a throwable weapon combined in one, a lot of work from God of War 2018 went into that weapon. And we've kind of pushed it even further this time around. So yeah, that's a lot of work goes into these weapons. So, super excited for people to play them.
Yeah, and it's also the combination of the two weapons, right? So this time around, since you're going to have the blades a lot earlier, we tried to do a lot of things to make sure that, like Mihir was saying, you're not just sticking with one weapon at the same time. We do things to encourage you to swap between the axe and the blades. The axe and the blades have their own little quirks in terms of what's strong. Like the axe has long range, the triangle attack. I forget what we actually called the triangle attack. What is the axe triangle attack? The Frost Awaken?
Yep.
Yeah, so the axe Frost Awaken move that allows you to prep a little bit earlier. You could charge up your axe, you could run in afterwards and then unleash it. Whereas the blades are a little bit more in the moment, where you have to for the blades whiplash, you have to like spin the blades and then unleash it there. And then like generally blades being more like multi-target versus the axe being single target. There's a lot of enemies that may be better suited to using the blades versus using the axe. And then like in 1v1 encounters, there's still situations where you want to use the blades, even though the axe is the stronger general single target. So there's a lot of like different small little like tweaks that go into just making sure that both weapons have their own little moments to shine, and there's incentive to swap between the two in the middle of combat and just feel awesome doing it.
Here's my question for you guys. This is unscripted, all right? What is the better weapon for the wretch, in your opinion?
So that's actually a good example of trying to make it so that both weapons have their own little strengths and weaknesses. Because against the wretches, since they're very like they swarm you, there's a lot of them. Generally, you think, yeah, blades are very strong against them because you can just like do a little like sweeps and hit multiple at a time, which is true. But there's also the case where the axe has longer range, and generally the wretches, like Mihir was saying, they're like the annoying but kind of fun enemies where they'll actually scurry away from you, kind of like cockroaches. They'll try to like spread out. So in some cases, using the axe might actually be stronger in certain situations because the wretch will actually run away and get out of range of your melee attacks. Then you can just toss your axe and dispatch them like that. So it's actually, there's a lot of nuance in terms of like which weapon will be stronger. Sometimes the blades will be stronger against wretches. Sometimes the axe will be stronger, depending on the arena that you're fighting them in and like how many are around.
Cool. So I had one question myself. Sorry, I'm literally taking over this Q&A. But we didn't touch on this much in the BTS episode. If you guys have had the chance to watch it, but I know that you've touched on it in a few interviews, but we don't need to go super deep into it. But since you guys mentioned it, the utilization of the triangle button to add some more attacks and kind of build in those element applications for the axe and the blades. Could you guys maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. There's a couple of questions in here. Actually, I was going to go into this. So I'll keep it brief here, and then we'll revisit. But yeah, they're called the weapon signature abilities. When we were looking at God of War Ragnarok at the beginning, we were wondering, what can we do that on the buttons, right? Like something very close to home on the buttons feels different this time around. And we use a lot of buttons on the controller. we like to cram as much as we can in that controller. And the triangle button was the one that in God of War 2018, that button is always used to recall the axe. Which is great, which is really cool, except when you have the axe already in your hand, that button does nothing. And that's what we would call prime real estate, right, on the controller. We use very dramatic terms for these things, but it's just a possibility of like what if, right? So that was kind of the initial challenge, and fun fact, I didn't want to do it. I was like, no, the triangle button is too important for recall, and Eric here actually pushed me into really looking at that. And then it was almost like a funny switch because that I got really into the idea after he pushed me into it, and then he was worried a little bit, like, "Oh, I don't know, this is changing something that's really core to the game." And I was like, "No, we have to do it." So it's funny. It's like we give a lot of thought to every little thing in the game, and just with every new change, there's a possibility of it being awesome, but there's always the possibility of is this going to make it worse, right? I'm sure we've all played games and sequels where not every change made is for the better, and that's something that we really care about. We really care about making something where after you've played this, you can't go back. Right? Jason McDonald, design director on God of War Ragnarok, longtime Sony Santa Monica designer, always says this. Just make it so that you can't go back. And I think I'll talk about it more, but I do think this is a change that when players really get into it, if you ever go back and play God of War 2018, you're going to be pressing triangle all the time and being like, wait, where's my move? What happened?
Okay, so I think the next question that would lead into this then, I believe it was the one by King Claw. So thank you, King Claw, for asking. But how did you guys design and balance Kratos' kit for his gameplay to promote multiple ways to play?
Yes, I'll probably start on this one. I'll pass it on to Denny. But so the question of this is basically talking about different play styles, right? One of the key traits that we've really pushed on God of War Ragnarok is player expression, which is a term that maybe some people have heard about. Everyone has their own interpretation, but for us, I'll give a pretty poetic analogy of playing an instrument. This was actually at the very beginning of God of War Ragnarok. There we had like this little inspiration book that we used to share the vision to the team, and this was in there about all music comes from 12 notes, but it's how the notes are kind of skewed and put together, and you get all different kinds of music, right? And that's kind of the idea with player expression, is that okay, everyone has the same moves and the same controls and the same mechanics, but hopefully everyone can kind of insert a little bit of themselves into how they play, right? Kratos is Kratos. Kratos is this epic character that we have. But we want the journey to be something that feels special to you. And so when we look at combat, we're always thinking about all of our different kinds of players. We have so many players. It's awesome that we hit such a large audience. And we want to give you reasons why you might want to play Kratos a little bit differently, a little bit this way, a little bit that way. And our philosophy is that everything that's in the game should have a customer. They don't always have to be the same customer, right? Not everyone has to like the exact same things that are in the game, but that's a good thing. It's a great thing if I can play Kratos in a way that's completely different than the way that you might play Kratos. But they're both super satisfying and they both feel true to the character. So, I think we've greatly expanded upon this on God of War Ragnarok. Don't want to talk about things too much in the future, but it's really exciting. I think for all of us on the combat team, this is something we're very excited about. Yeah, Denny, you have more to speak on this?
Yeah, and it touches on what we talked about before about encouraging the two weapons, the blades and the axe. But we generally, like, if you're a player that generally likes the blades more and you want to be like a blades type play style, then you could still be like heavily focused on the blades while like swapping to the axe every now and then. It's not really about like making sure everyone is equally like blades and axe. It's like the weighting of what you play as is going to differ depending on what you care about. And a lot of this is also in the gear systems that we have. So like the two shields that we revealed, the Dauntless and the Stonewall shield, that's a great example of really trying to cater to all different types of players, right? So like Dauntless, if you're like a player that really likes the like Twitch type gameplay of like reflexively blocking at the last moment, that's the shield for you, because that shield, if you parry like right before the attack hits you with really good timing, then you're going to get a cool reward where your shield powers up and then you can double tap L1 to do like a super powerful shield strike that knocks the enemy away. Whereas if you're the type of player that maybe is a little bit more methodical, maybe doesn't enjoy the timing aspect of gameplay more, or you like kind of like being just more strategic and thinking things out, then the Stonewall shield is for you, because that shield, that's like the big tower shield. You can just hold L1. Your block is stronger. You'll be able to block attacks that normally would break your guard from other shields. And the Stonewall shield has this mechanic where the more you block with it, you're actually getting rewarded for being defensive, because as you block more attacks, the shield will power up. And then the more power that has been absorbed into the shield, when you double tap L1 and you slam your shield to the ground, you can do like a big AoE blast with it. So the shield, that's just one aspect of like, player choice in terms of how you want to tailor your experience. And both those shields are perfectly viable. You can go through the entire game playing with your favorite shield. There's a lot of there's a few other shields to come that we're not going to talk about here, but there's a lot of different ways that you can like choose the different parts of your kit to focus on. And that
Yeah,
also
and just to add to that, like one thing about this idea, and this is definitely influenced by Eric at the helm, is what are ways that we can respect player choice, right? So the way that Denny's talking about the shields in terms of like, it's not like one is better. It's just that these are different, and it's kind of what do you want, and how do we let you play that way? We're on the combat team, and even across the studio, we have a lot of fighting game fans. And one thing that's a quote from Eric is always like, if I want to play Zangief, like let me play Zangief, right? I want to play Geef. And what that, for those that might not be familiar, in Street Fighter, there's a character named Zangief who's a grappler, and is all, that character is all about getting right in your face, grabbing you, and dishing out tons of damage. So that concept getting applied to a game like God of War Ragnarok. One of the things we looked at was like the stun system that we had on God of War 2018, and Eric was like, I really like stunning enemies. I want to play all about that. And on God of War 2018, that system existed, but there were certain fights where it wasn't really viable, or it wasn't really an option that you could lean into. And it was like, well, that feels bad. That's not like that's not respecting my choice as a player. And so that's the type of thing that we've really paid attention to, and Eric's done, a lot to kind of encourage that respect the choice. The choices are viable. Let people make their music, right? Like let people make the type of combat that they want to make, and that's been, exciting about God of War Ragnarok.
Yeah, thanks, Mihir. I'll touch on this one a little bit since I was messing around in the chat because I don't know how Discord works. So apologies for the slow uptake on all that. But yeah, I always kind of like look at it from the point of view, like I know a lot of people in video games don't like sports, but I look at sports all the time because they're games as much as games are games. But you can have a different person play shortstop in Major League Baseball. You can have a really tall person that's fat, or got a lot of range. You can have a really small, fast person, and they can still play shortstop, and they can hit and field differently, and all these kind of things. And that's what I really look at, is that expression. It doesn't matter kind of how you want to approach the combat, it's going to allow for that. Whereas some games, they kind of route you. If you're not willing to play this type of character, you might be out on the fringes, or wanting something more. But we wanted Kratos to be a little bit more well-rounded based on your choices, or you could push him off into really deep waters, on the bounds of what he can do. And Mihir and Denny and a few other people on the team really embrace that, and I want to touch back to what he was talking about early on with the triangle button. Probably giving away a little bit of my secret, but I like to push like all the way to where we break something, and then we kind of bring it back and almost get scared again, but then people kind of embrace the change, and then they don't want to go back. And I think that's where the magic happens. And so you never want to kind of do like micro steps. You want to really do big swings when you're adjusting the game. And we call that kind of like Goldilocks problem solving, where it's like it's too hot, it's too cold, and you just keep ping ponging between those extremes until you get it just right in the middle. And our design team has embraced that a lot across the board. And I would say that's true of the entire team, but specifically the design, because of so much iteration that happens inside the game. But yeah, I'm really excited for you guys to play and see all the different builds in the final game and stuff, because I mean, I've played the game about 10 times this year, and I have run a different build every single time and had just as much fun. So it's a testament to what these guys have been able to create, and with a few other people like Rob Meyer and behind the scenes, some names that we'll try to get out there soon to you guys that been an amazing group to put this design and progression system together. So I'll turn it back over to these guys for the next question. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, I think we covered that pretty well, so we're gonna move on to the next question for the sake of time. So, this next one is from YouTube's Midgard Chronicler. So he's asking, could you please talk a little bit more about the armor/level up system, if that's allowed? It is. I'm reading these verbatim. How different is it from 2018? Should we still expect enchantments, stats, etc.? And are the systems for armors parties any different? Thank you very much. So that was like 50 questions there. So I'll let you guys touch on it to the extent that you see fit.
Yeah,
Obviously, we can't
it's a
say
good
everything,
follow up
but-
to the topic we were just talking about. So, we'll try to talk about this without giving spoilers away about some of the aspects that are new and exciting about God of War Ragnarok. But like we were talking about before, I think one of the biggest changes is that all pieces of armor go to level 9, which is the max level in the game. So in God of War 2018, we had armor pieces had a limited amount of upgrades that they could have, which means that the starting power level would often indicate how high that piece could go. So eventually, you might like a piece of gear you'd have to swap out. And on this game, everything scales, right? All choices matter. That's kind of the catchphrase. So it's really more about your choice, and there are situational reasons why you would want to switch. So it's not like there's a lot of choice and there's reasons to kind of engage in the choice. But everything kind of goes up, which means that the amount of permutations, the amount of variety that you're likely to see in choice and builds and things like that is really on a different level this game. And I think this is probably one of the things that on the combat side we're very, very excited to see. Because even like internally in the studio, we've just found so many people playing in different ways and bringing up surprising combinations. That's it's definitely something that I'm super excited to see. A lot of great work on it from multiple teams within the combat team, within our PI, what we call the player investment team, making sure all of that stuff gets distributed in a fun way that's rewarding for progression. And I mean, and not even just the armor, but just like different pieces of gear. Like Denny was talking about the shields earlier, but all of the shields actually they have a new piece of gear called a shield component. So if you think about the axe and the blades, they have the pommel or the grip that they can be swapped out or upgraded, and they kind of change a little bit of your playstyle. They might give you a certain kind of perk. Similarly, we have a piece of gear on the shields, which will affect kind of defensive behaviors or things that kind of make you think about combat in a slightly different way. So lots here to talk about. I think it's super exciting. And I just saw a video this morning actually on YouTube, kind of from the preview window, talking about this in more depth. And I was like, okay, this person's got it. They're picking up on some things. So yeah, Den, you got more to add to that?
Yeah, the other thing too with like being able to bring armors to level 9 too is this time around we introduce a lot more, like I'd say, armors that adjust to your gameplay a lot more. So armors that really, like, for example, like when Mihir was saying, if you want to play a stun build, right? There'll be armors throughout the path of the game that will basically boost that. And then there'll be other armors that, if you like doing a lot of runic attacks, there'll be armors that give you some perks that allow you to do that in some really cool, fun, interesting ways. And there'll be armors that, like, if you want to be like a berserker that is like very hard to kill, like just a juggernaut, you'll have armors that focus on that as well. And I think this time around, the armors are a lot more integral to the way you play the game. It changes gameplay a lot more. Whereas in 2018, we had some armors like that, but a lot of them were kind of more in the end game. Some of the like armors that you get in the critical path of the game, they were a little bit more like they boosted your stats and increased your power a little bit, but they didn't change that much about like your basic combat loop. Whereas this time around, like Eric was saying, he played through the game multiple times trying different builds. I think it'll add a lot more replayability to this game, where like you might go down, you might start the game again, and then now you choose to try out different armors, and the fact that all the armors can reach level 9, now you can actually play through the majority of the game with that armor and have a very different experience. And then also just have fun looking at the other different pieces of gear and trying to match them to what your build is to try to get the good synergy. And then there's some things like later in the game too that we're not going to be talking about, but I think if you're the kind of player that enjoys this type of things with like gear and like builds and such, there's some really cool things down the road that will actually allow you to do things that you might not have expected you'd be able to do in the last game, where it's just like adjusting some of the rules of the game.
And the great thing is that for players that are super into this, right, this is all great news, but we also are aware that there are many players that maybe this isn't the thing that they really enjoy about the game, right? Like maybe the armor stuff and some of these elements are not why they really enjoy this type of game. And so a new feature on God of War Ragnarok is the AutoEquip. So there is a system in the game that allows you to kind of shortcut through some of the stuff to say, hey, you know what, if I just want to pick a strength build and not really worry about the details, I don't want to min-max everything, there's something that removes a lot of friction there. So we're really trying to cater to all different kinds of players. If this is the type of depth that you're interested in, great, there's a lot here for you. But similarly, if you don't, if this isn't your cup of tea, then no problem, right? There's a way for you to kind of move through this a little bit quicker.
Well, since we're talking about armor, I like to look good. All right, everyone at the studio knows this about me. Fashion first for Kratos, of course. I know one of the requests that we had from 2018 version was the ability to maybe have the stats you want, but also give Kratos the runway look as well that you want. So this is a question from Spirit Wolf and a lot of other people, which is, will there be an armor transmog system? Question.
Short answer is yes. There is a way to do this. I know, surprise, surprise. It's very exciting, very exciting for all of us.
Okay.
Yeah. We're probably.
If you want to say anything else about
should
that,
we say anything else? I don't know.
Don't say anything else.
Let's not say anything else. But
Okay,
yes,
fine.
it is in the game.
It's there. Grace.
Yeah.
The people have 12 days to wait. Just chill out, okay?
But I'm excited about it.
I know you're excited about it. You're excited about everything. So
Okay, fine.
People, right?
Hold me back, guys. Okay, well, that's a short one, but we know that is, I don't know, maybe big news for a lot of people, or not big news, but fun news. Okay, so next question comes from, God, these names. Lefuriel asks, when creating the skill tree for the game, do you guys create all the combat skills / moves, then subtract them from the skill tree, or do you guys start with a base combat setup and add skills to it bit by bit?
Great question. I love this question. This is like a very designery question, so I'll have fun talking about this. Yeah, so this is giving a little bit of behind the scenes insight. So we know we're going to have a skill tree in the game like this. We want to obviously make it fun to kind of unlock different moves over time. But when we actually start working on things, we don't think about it from the skill tree perspective. We think about it from a character perspective. So what I mean by this is that when you look at a character like Kratos and we're starting God of War Ragnarok, we're just wondering, what are things that this character can do? Like, what are things that you'd want to do? What would feel different this time around? Where should it feel the same? Where should it feel different? Where should it feel like a big change or a small change? And so we kind of do all of that first, right? We're trying to figure out, what are all the skills? What are all the moves? And we have to get a good idea of what that is, at least at a baseline. And so that takes quite a while. Once we've kind of done all of that and we're like, okay, we feel good about this, we can start taking that design and start building a skill tree. And then it almost like switches, where then we're thinking about, well, how do we fill out the skill tree, right? So we everything that we've mapped it onto a skill tree, but we're thinking like, you know what, we could use some more stuff. And then we start putting it in and we think, you know what, maybe it's cool to add a little bit of an upgrade to this move, or what if this move worked a little bit differently? And that part's really, really fun. Like internally, once we get to that point where it's kind of reversing the design, it's really collaborative too. I mean, we're just talking to people across the team of, what abilities do you really like? What are we seeing in playtests that are really successful? and then finding out like we want to layer to that and add on to it and kind of flesh the whole skill tree out. And there's a lot of work that goes hand in hand with our UI and UX teams with regards to how the skill tree will look and function and what how can we make that experience better this time around. And that might influence a little bit of the combat design of how we might break up a move or change something there. So it's a pretty exciting part of the project when it happens. And then there's the layer of how do we make this overall just feel better and different. And that's one thing this time around God of War 2018. For anyone who's been following some of the preview content, a few people have talked about this. But there's actually a brand new system within the skill tree this time around, which are skill labors and skill tokens, skill mod tokens. So the idea here is that with all of these skills that you have in the skill tree, the more that you use skills, you'll kind of like progress what we call a labor in the game. So that's basically if you use the skill a certain amount of times, you'll unlock these different tiers, right? It'll say like bronze, silver, gold. And every time you unlock a tier, you're getting some experience that you can use those experience points to buy new skills or do whatever you want with them. But once you get a skill to gold tier, which is the highest level, you unlock what's called a skill mod token. And that means that you now have a choice of 3 different modifiers on that skill that you can. So some examples of these are like modifying the damage up by a little bit, or modifying the stun up by a lot, or the amount of elemental damage, or just a couple of others in there. And the great thing is once you unlock that, it's your choice to switch as much as you want within those 3 options. It costs a little bit of XP to get that, but once you have it, you can swap those out. You can adjust it to your playstyle. And this is all over the skill tree. So there's a whole new kind of metagame or thing kind of layered in the game about this. And it's been received really, really well internally. So I'm really excited to see what people think when they play it. It's had a lot of really positive feedback on it from across the team and on playtests and things like that. So great question.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up on that one. I said in the chat to listen to me here because this is one of my favorite parts of Ragnarok. It's always fun to unlock the skill tree, but then some people forget about some of the skills that are there. This new system kind of like almost encourages you to continually use things that maybe you didn't, and it helps you explore the system and learn new ways to, attack and defend on the battlefield. But the best part about it is that you can customize it. And so like if you run into a fight where you might need to, adjust the way that you build out that tree or customize the tokens in the tree, it allows for that. And between the 2 weapons, you can even have like, where sometimes I'll run stun on the axe and I'll run elemental on the blades, or maybe I'll shift that around. But it just gives you so much more control over how you want Kratos to be at the end of the day while you're battling inside the combat system. So, for those people that really want to dive deep, this is that system. And I'm very proud of the team for the work that they put into it, because it wasn't an easy thing. There's so much that goes into balancing it and making it feel fair but strong at the same time. And just please give it a good shake, because I think it is one of the highlights of the combat system in this game. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you guys. We're gonna pivot a little bit and talk about some of the enemies here. So this is from Potato Man 1, who says, "Hello, I love you. Thank you. We love you too. How has the AI of the enemies been improved in combat with the increased verticality in this game?"
Yeah, so as you've seen from a lot of the preview footage, there's a lot more variety in arena types this time around. So one example would be when you talk about increased verticality, that's some of these bigger open spaces with multiple levels and such. And when you think about enemies, generally you think about like the attacks that they do, but actually one of the more important parts about the enemy is what you can do to them and how they can behave in a way that just is fun to engage with, right? So like an example of this would be in a lot of the footage you've seen, like Kratos knocks an enemy down and then he'll leap off and then he'll do like a ground pound attack to follow up. Or there'd be an enemy on the ledge somewhere and then Kratos will use his blades to grapple up. And then as he's jumping up, he does like an attack as he gets up, and that smoothly goes into the rest of his combat. So a lot of work has been done to both in terms of like the way the enemies position themselves, the way the enemies will react to the different types of things that you hit them with. So like, for example, if you knock an enemy off a ledge, they'll bounce a little bit farther back. It's a very like detailed specific thing, but what that actually allows you to more smoothly jump off and then attack them, right? So a lot of what goes into the enemy design is finding ways to make it so that it's accessible for players to, you know, like look cool and try do all the cool things. Like it's not, if you just think about it in terms of like, oh, I want to do this thing, like, and I just imagine it. Ideally, the enemies should be designed in such a way that it's not hard to do mechanically. It's just like if you can think about it, then you can try it, and ideally, the game will allow you to do it without that many roadblocks. And then like the enemies themselves, right? There's a lot of new different enemies in the game. There's some that have a lot more mobility, like the Grim. So they'll be kind of perching onto things. They'll be climbing up, and then as they're perched, they'll be like shooting you with projectiles. So when they're on those perches, you can actually there's some perches that actually are held up by this sonic material, so you can actually use Atreus's sonic arrows to knock them down, and you get like a nice little bonus to that. They just kind of encourage you to move around the space a lot more. And then there's also the Einjar, who also have a lot of these spaces where they do it a little bit differently, where they're not as slippery, but they also have a lot of tricks up their sleeves. Like they have a lot of different like gear and equipment that they can use that are Asgardian related that will allow them to basically fight you in these spaces in a way that feels very different from the way the Grim will fight you.
Yep, and just want to again shout out here that you know, for being an action, you know, this kind of action adventure game, we really want the action part to feel intuitive, right? And I think something about adding verticality and having all these enemies is that our game is, you know, in God of War 2018, we had a little bit of this, but the game really isn't built around this. And there's a lot of things behind the scenes, way too much to get into here about like all of the work that goes into this. And especially on, you know, there's the combat design side of this, but there's another big part with the engineering side and the AI side. And we have, again, incredible partners on those teams that have really worked with us to figure out, like, you know, how can we make things just feel natural and feel correct. And there's so many things that can kind of not feel good doing this. So like something Denny was talking about, and I want to paint a picture for everyone here. By having some verticality, you know, imagine you're near a ledge, right? And you're starting to do a combo. And you know, at the end of a combo, there's a big combo finisher, and it feels really good to land that hit, right? But what if on the hit right before it, you knock the enemy off and you just miss the combo finisher? That would feel really bad, right? Like that's going to feel really unsatisfying. But that's kind of a normal thing that would happen if you have a ledge in the middle of combat. And so we do a lot of things behind the scenes to basically solve that, to keep enemies up there, because we know that, you know, it's not a good time for them to fall down. And if they do fall down, you know, we have a closer camera. And so what if you can't even see them once they fall down? That's going to feel pretty bad, right? So we have to make sure that they're kind of pushed back enough where you can see them. And then when they move, they're kind of still moving in a space that makes sense. So it's a really interesting problem. And I think the reward for all of that work is, for a player, you're not thinking about this. You're just thinking about, okay, this is a playground that I can go into. I can start a combo up here. I can continue it down there. It's all fluid. And it's been a really interesting challenge on God of War Ragnarok to dive deep into this, from both, again, the engineering side and the design side, and really proud with how it turned out. I think, you know, we've seen it at different stages throughout development, and it's really fun now. So I'm, you know, looking forward to people playing it.
Yeah, and to add to that too, like what we're talking about with verticality and such, that's just one tool in our toolkit, right? So one of the, I think, big strengths of our game here is that there's a lot of variety in terms of both in terms of the enemies that you fight, because we definitely took that feedback seriously, where there's a lot more variety on the enemies side. But there's also a lot more variety in terms of the different types of encounters that you can fight. And this is a big shout out to the encounters team with Andrew Christopidis doing a lot of this work to just make sure that even beyond just like who you're fighting, there's a big difference in how you're fighting them. So like you might have some encounters with these big enhanced spaces with a lot of different levels where you're jumping around, moving around a lot. But there might also be other encounters more similar to the God of War 2018, where it's more of a classic like arena type encounter. You'll have other encounters with closer spaces, give you that little claustrophobic type of feel. And you'll also have other encounters where you're just fighting one enemy in this like cool duel type situation, right? So it's all about like all the different aspects of combat coming together to just keep the game feeling fresh, so that as you go through the story of the game, you're constantly seeing new things, whether it's new enemies that you fight or the same enemies that you fought, but now you fight them in a very different type of situation, and you have to think about things differently.
So this next question, I think, is in a similar vein to this. We'll just go into this. So this one is from Door, who says, I was watching the GDC talk from here a few years ago about the enemy positioning system and how you guys go through multiple iterations of the system. So shout out to people who watch our GDC talks, the real one. And they ask, did you have to change up the positioning system with the focus on verticality in all the combat arenas, or did it stay the same for the most part?
First of all, I gotta show some love. I mean, whoever's like actually making it through my GDC talk, there's a special place in my heart for those
You do
people.
great. You do great.
So yeah, no, appreciate it. And actually, I think in this chat somewhere, I think we have Goksu who's listening, who's our AI lead on the engineering side, and I'm sure she could talk about this a lot. But the short answer is yes, there are quite a few changes that have to happen in our positioning system for this to work. I'll just say it. I have on Twitter, I have like this meme of a quote, but I do mean it, which is that everything that's made is made with a certain assumption, and changing those assumptions is pretty difficult, and that's definitely something here. But we even think about the question of where should an enemy? Oh, did I drop out?
Hello? Yeah.
You're back now, though.
Oh, weird. Yeah, sorry for anyone who doesn't know, I had to like join and rejoin Discord because my audio's out. What's the last thing I said?
Where should an enemy stand?
That's a good question. Just philosophically, just to think about.
Yeah. Morally, where do they stand?
Yeah, morally, where do they stand? No, but just but the point that I was trying to get to is just like there's these simple things that as a player you don't think about, but as soon as you add these gaps and verticality and things like that, we have to kind of rethink a lot of these things. And our positioning system in general was one that had a huge, a lot of things we had to kind of look at to prevent some kind of behaviors that would be kind of funny, where enemies are running back and forth or jumping up and down again and again, things like that. So it's fun working through all this. Fun for us. We make Goksu's life a little hard, but that's okay. But it came out pretty well.
Eric, I thought you were a meeting. Were you just gonna make fun of Mahir, or do you have something to
I
add?
was gonna have to step in and do Mahir's GDC talk. I rehearsed it so much last night.
Okay, you want to start? Is that good?
First of all, why did you all come here? Oh wait, that's Hayato's. Sorry, I got
He's got all of them memorized. So shout out to Goksu. I think you are in chat, so great work. All right. So this one I think should be pretty quick. But Spookless asks, what are the different difficulty options? Let's settle it once and for all, because we also get this question a lot.
Yeah, so this time around we have 5 difficulty options. So the one right in the middle is called Give Me Balance. That you can kind of think about it akin to Give Me a Balanced experience on God of War 2018. Below that, there's 2 easier difficulties this time around. There's Give Me Grace and Give Me Story. So Give Me Story, you can think about it like Give Me Story from the last game. It's kind of like we still allow you to do a lot of cool, fun stuff. You can still engage in all the systems and such, but it's not as strict, right? It's more for players that just want to, experience the story and just kind of go through it and have a relaxing time. Give Me a Grace mode is somewhere in between that, where there's a lot of edits done on Give Me Grace, where it's a little bit more forgiving than Give Me Balance, where enemies won't attack you as frequently as on Give Me Balance. There'll be a lot more adjustments done to help you manage the camera a little bit more, where because enemies won't attack you as often, there'll be less enemies attacking you as well. So you won't have to worry as much about someone paying attention to someone that dodged off screen to the right and then hitting you from the right side, right? So Give Me a Grace will be somewhere between those two, where if Give Me a Balance was too hard for you, but you also still want to be challenged a little bit more by the combat, then Give Me a Grace is for you. And then above Give Me Balance, there's Give Me No Mercy, which is like Give Me a Challenge from the God of War 2018. That's obviously a little bit more escalated in terms of the enemy behaviors. They're a lot more aggressive. Enemies are a little bit more dangerous in terms of the damage they deal. Some of their behaviors have changed. They're a little bit more tricky, right? They have a little bit more like mix-ups and different patterns that they'll do. And then above that is Give Me God of War, which, if you play the last game, that's basically the hardest difficulty, right? And this time around, too, there's been a lot of adjustments we've done on Give Me God of War based on our own feedback on what we thought we did well and what we thought we could have improved. So one of the big things is the difficulty I feel is a lot more smooth this time around. So one of the things with Give Me God of War last game was we didn't allow you to switch the difficulty down, right? So if you picked Give Me God of War on God of War 2018, you couldn't actually go back to hard if you were having too much trouble. So as a result of that, we tuned the early game of Give Me God of War harder so that if the game was too hard for you, you knew early and you didn't have to go through half the game and then get stuck and have to restart. This time around, you are allowed to switch the difficulty down. So if you are on Give Me God of War and you start and then you feel like it's too much for you, you want to bump it down, you're allowed to do that. So what we've done is we've made the difficulty a lot smoother so that it's gonna kind of like ramp up, right? So the early game isn't so brutal anymore. It's a little bit more, it'll ease you into it a little bit more. And I think by the end up harder or just as hard as the older Give Me God of War. And also, just like the way the difficulty is tuned too, a big part of what we've done is try to make it so that the lethality of enemies is kind of at the forefront. Enemies won't allow you to make as much mistakes as before. But one thing that we've tried to is to reduce just like the overall tankiness of enemies, right? So there's also a lot more tools from Kratos himself to deal with tanky enemies when they do come in. So I think a big difference is too that it should feel a little bit more breezier than Give Me God of War from the last game, but it should also feel a lot more dangerous, right? You feel like you're a little bit more on edge when you're playing through, making sure that you're trying to play as perfect as you can, but not at the cost of pacing, where you don't feel like you're just like smacking a guy for a minute before they go down.
Yeah, just one thing to add to that is that while you can drop down difficulties this time around from Gimme God of War, if you do drop down, you can't come back up. So there is still a level of prestige to Gimme God of War difficulty, where if you make it through the game, it means that you play the entire way through. I think that's something that our players, kind of enjoyed, that level of challenge. But like Denny said, we think it's better this time around that give it a shot, right? Like we want players to play those that are interested in it, give it a chance, play on Gimme God of War. If it's something that you're not enjoying your time with, you're able to drop down at any time later. And I think that like our general philosophy on difficulty is that we want all of these modes to be a blast, right? Like we tune each of these difficulties. It's not just like simple sliders behind the scenes. Like we're tuning specific things. And the way that you find the game to be the funnest is the right difficulty, right? Like that's the way that we think about it. On Gimme God of War, we are demanding more from players. There are more things you have to think about. There's a few new twists to the combat that you have to take into consideration. So I think, like Denny was saying, it's really about mitigating your mistakes and making use of all of your tools. But it shouldn't be the, only on the hard difficulties is where you're going to have, a really fun time and feel like you're really strong as Kratos. Like, no, it's true for all of these difficulties. So one thing that we always like to encourage is, play the game at the difficulty that's the most fun for you, and you're free to swap, right? If you hit a point where you're not having a good time, feel free to change the difficulty. If maybe it's too challenging, you want to drop it down a little bit, that's fine, drop it down. Maybe you want to switch it back up later. Or conversely, if you're maybe playing the game and maybe getting a little bit bored, it's like, okay, it feels like you're not getting challenged enough, bump it up. It's kind of a philosophy that we've always had, and we continue it on God of War Ragnarok, which is that this game is for everyone that wants to play it. So have a blast with it. The combat's fun on all the difficulties. We've made sure of that. But yeah, if you can make it through the whole game on Give Me God of War, it's I quoted in some of the articles and stuff saying like this game is about playing with your food, and then Denny was quick to correct me. Well, be careful because the food can eat you, and I think that's totally true about Give Me God of War.
Yeah, I think one goal that we generally try to keep in mind as we're tuning all the difficulties is that none of the difficulties should feel like it's limiting any part of your gameplay as a player, right? So sometimes when difficulties are done incorrectly, or maybe there was just not enough time to tune it, it might like devolve into a case where like, oh, I just have to do the safest thing because the difficulty is too hard, right? What we've tried to do with Give Me God of War and some of the harder difficulties is make it so that it's actually encouraging you to use more of your tools rather than less. So even though the game is harder, the tools that you have at your disposal, those are the things that are available to you to try to balance the difficulty for yourself, to try to overcome the added pressure of the enemies. And the same goes for like some of the easier difficulties. Is like, even though those difficulties they're a little bit less demanding, there's still a lot of tuning that goes into making sure that you can still do a lot of all the cool fun stuff, and you can still basically feel like the God of War as you're playing through, and just have a good time no matter what difficulty you're playing as.
So obviously I'm super flattered, but why did you guys decide to name a difficulty mode after me specifically?
That was the purpose. Give Me Grace was absolutely a tribute to you, Grace. No other reason.
Thank you. Thank you. I thought so. I just wanted you to confirm it on the record. Okay, we're just about at time, so we're gonna blast off rapid fire one last question with a fun one from 13 days left. I guess their name is probably 12 days left today. Super quick. 1 to 2 sentences. What is the most fun part of your job aside from working with me? Denny, go.
Trolling me here.
Okay, am I here?
Okay, I was going to say trolling, but I would say generally just being a cheerleader. I love what we do at the studio. I think we have some of the most incredibly talented people in the industry, and so just being a cheerleader to all the different things going on. Sometimes being a pain to some people, but generally being a cheerleader is a fun part of the job.
Eric?
All the people, everyone here, like that makes Santa Monica work. It's like there's so many unsung heroes from so many different departments that they're probably in the chat right now. We have security guards that keep this place safe, so I can come here every day and continue working on it. They're never going to be known. They're out there. Everybody's taking care of this place, so it's absolutely amazing. So the people, always people for me. Thank you.
All right, well, I think that's we're at noon right now, so that's all we got for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining us and submitting your questions. Shout out to Blue once again for keeping the Discord tight and making sure that there's tons of activities and that's fun here. Thank you to our mods who've done a wonderful job of moderating all the time, but also here when there's a lot of people coming in. And thank you to our speakers, Denny, Mihir, and Eric.